Good afternoon. First, welcome to everyone.
She is a very strict woman who always wears glasses, speaks without any emotion, and sometimes does something incredibly logical.
And from the perspective of financial literacy, of course, basic knowledge is important.
It is Elvira Nabiullina who, for several years now, has been keeping the Russian economy on life support, sometimes even using a defibrillator.
Overall trust in the financial system has been maintained, but it's not to say everything is hopeless. We functioning institutions.
She doesn't promise that everything will be fine when everything is heading into the abyss.
This doesn't mean that we consider this scenario likely, but we need to understand how the situation will develop.
The Russian budget deficit has already appeared in the first quarter of the year. Oil prices and revenues are falling. The Ministry of Finance is selling foreign currency and even gold from the reserves. In 2025, political pressure on the leadership of the Russian central bank increased. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War suggest that the high interest rate is to blame for everything. They are doing everything they can to hide the inflation caused by Russia's war in Ukraine.
A Russian insider source stated that the Accounts Chamber of the Federation, Council of the Russian Federation, recently initiated an audit of the Central Bank of Russia to investigate its monetary policy from 2022 to 2024 and the impact of the interest rate on inflation, budget expenditures, and investment. The source said that the investigation is essentially an attack on Nabiullina.
And that's true. Elvira Nabiullina keeps raising the key interest rate whenever the ruble hits rock bottom.
I'm perfectly fine with that, especially when the jokes are genuinely funny.
The head of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation states that high inflation in Russia is due to massive budget spending. As we know, the lion's share of that goes to the war started by Putin.
This year, the budget will certainly have a disinflationary effect because the structural deficit is significantly shrinking. So therefore, there's really no point in discussing with the government the abandonment of advanced financing in our considered view. Indeed, this is a crucial aspect to consider. Moreover, it's probably necessary to support the development of certain enterprises.
No matter how incredibly hard big Russian business truly tries, it still absolutely can't get Elvira to lower the prevailing interest rate.
There needs to be stability and predictability in the rules of the game.
We receive highly preferential loans and significantly subsidized interest rates. However, this primarily applies, of course, to the state defense order. Everything else is unfortunately left to truly and completely fend for itself.
Nabiullina doesn't even spare the head of Rostek, Chemezov.
Our economy is overheated and needs to be cooled down.
The Iron Lady is unshakable. She does not print money, even when Defense Minister Belousov stands directly before her and earnestly begs for arms for the front.
We not only have to precisely answer the question of what a supply-side economy truly is, but also how to effectively create one in today's prevailing conditions.
Her position remains unchanged. As psychologists say, true character is forged in childhood.
However, we know little about it, except that she grew up in Ufa. Her father was a driver, and her mother worked at a factory. Elvira was an all-A student and generally a very good girl.
Nabiullina was raised by her grandmother while her parents were busy working.
When I was in school, I took sewing and tailoring classes.
A straight-A student, Nabiullina got into the economics faculty at Moscow State University entirely on her own, without any help or connections, and graduated with honors as well. Naturally, Elvira was one of the first in her class to join the Communist Party.
Did you graduate from school with a gold medal? No? Why not?
Turned out there weren't enough. But I graduated with all A's.
All A's, but no medal?
Yes.
Nabiullina began building her career in the 90s, when Russia's economy resembled a dead cat. But what is there to say? Elvira spent 3 decades lifting the Russian economy off its knees, only for it to start smelling like the 90s again in 2025.
A truly good girl who unfortunately got mixed up with a very bad crowd.
In 2002, by a decree from Putin, Nabiullina was awarded the rank of actual state councillor of the first class.
Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. Dear friends, I am pleased to welcome you to such a distinguished gathering
In 2012, after another round of Putin's elections, Nabiullina found the doors to the Kremlin open to her. She was appointed as Putin's aide on economic affairs.
People are responsible for their own decisions and the consequences they make.
Elvira Nabiullina worked her way through the Ministry of Economic Development, rose to the rank of minister, and in 2013, Putin personally entrusted her with the position of head of the central bank.
The decision we are making today is a very serious one. The decision has been made. Elvira Sadovna, congratulations on your appointment as chair of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation.
Thank you very much for expressing your position. Thank you to those who supported me and to those who did not.
Since then, Elvira Sadovna Nabiullina has been Russia's chief banker, a prominent figure.
Currently, financial markets are stable and the banking sector continues to function normally. This shows that our financial system is now much more resilient than in previous years.
Her career took off.
Money is in many ways a matter of faith.
Yes. Well, faith backed by experience.
But Elvira had no idea what awaited her, just as she didn't know that in just a year, Putin would occupy Ukraine's Crimea and heavy sanctions would fall on her fragile shoulders.
If it hadn't been for Crimea, there would have been other problems. They would have come up with something else to contain Russia. That's always how the policy of containing Russia has been presented.
In 2014, Nabiullina had no other choice but to launch the mechanism of raising the key interest rate from 10% to 17% per annum.
These so-called sanctions are, of course, complete and utter nonsense on the part of those governments that restrict their own businesses and significantly hinder their operations.
There's a war going on in Donbass. Crimea is living under the occupation of the little green men.
As a result, although the ruble's exchange rate dropped quite significantly, we continued to maintain financial stability.
Elvira Nabiullina officially begins a newly significant term as the chair of the Central Bank of Russia.
By the end of 2017, the period of recovery after the crisis-induced decline will, in a sense, be over.
In 2024, the Russian government continues to spend enormous amounts on the military, protects businesses from sanctions, and the central bank sharply raises the interest rate to 21%.
Right now, the key interest rate is 21%. That's extremely high.
The ruble has fallen. This was done on purpose. Nabiullina should be kicked out immediately.
It is precisely Nabiullina's macroeconomic flexibility and agility that allow Putin to increase spending on the war.
Good afternoon. Today we made a decision to raise the key interest rate.
In December of 2024, the central bank, under Nabiullina's leadership, carefully kept the key interest rate at 21%, this being the highest level observed since 2003. However, even such a rate is most likely understated.
We need to explain things so that people understand. In such circumstances, of course, people need to be helped so that they and businesses can adapt.
The key interest rate is like a magic switch that the central bank uses to regulate the temperature in the boiler. Nabiullina sits by this boiler and tries to revive what cannot be revived.
The patient is truly more dead than alive, indeed.
Only 2% by quantity is foreign currency mortgages.
Inflation is currently skyrocketing. The rate is being raised so that banks don't hand out loans left and right, and so that people aren't tempted to borrow.
Dude, are you okay?
You can see inflation in Russia with the naked eye.
We are seeing a shift in the foreign economic sphere, with large transactions now being settled in rubles and yuan.
Analysts suggest that it fluctuates within the range of 10%. However, the Institute for the Study of War believes that the real figures could reach 20 or even 25%.
The decrease in inflation was also influenced by improved market sentiment and the strengthening of the ruble. Nevertheless, price pressure remains high and inflation expectations are elevated. This means that we need to maintain tight monetary policy conditions for an extended period.
Despite the growing political tension in Kremlin circles regarding the central bank chief's activities, Putin absolutely needs Nabiullina. It was she who truly helped him get through the difficult stages of the economic crisis he brought upon the country.
Well, that's precisely what I truly think.
Yeah, so is it genuinely possible to live on just $10,000?
Well, I completely agree.
In the first quarter of 2025, the Russian budget fell short by then 2 trillion rubles.
Where is the money, Lebowski?
Nabiullina is an atypical and rather strange but important figure in the Russian economy. Everyone around her obediently plays her game.
You know, in order to become a wealthy country that is a society where people are self-sufficient, both financially and in terms of their opportunities for development, education, and anything else, you, of course, need to have a complex economy.
Just as strange as Elvira herself is her declaration. Officially, she, like Putin, is as poor as a church mouse. There is nothing luxurious in her declaration except for an apartment of 112 square meters and an old Jaguar F-Type car.
I believe that saving up for your financial goals is better rather than living beyond your means.
And even her husband, the former rector of the Higher School of Economics, Yaroslav Kuzminov, owns only a relatively small plot of land of about 1,500 square meters with a dacha. Such is this truly exemplary family of top-ranking officials who are also altruists. It's truly remarkable how, among Putin's clique, which is riddled with corruption like metastases, this odd one out appeared.
It can be said with reasonable confidence that Nabiullina is not addicted to personal wealth. For example, she has been wearing the same pair of glasses for at least 4 years. We noticed this from interviews in 2020 and 2024.
However, the Nabiullina family does have a few skeletons in the closet. And here, the straight-A student Nabiullina was let down by her amorous husband Yaroslav Kuzminov.
In 2021, footage from a hidden camera surfaced online. A man resembling Nabiullina's husband, who is also the former rector of the Higher School of Economics, Yaroslav Kuzminov, is seen in a luxury hotel room spending time with his deputy, Valeria Casamara. It is likely that this scandal was made public specifically to hurt, cause pain, and create problems for the head of the central bank.
The cheerful and lively former rector of the Higher School of Economics was clearly bored with Elvira, who was obsessed with her work. And probably that's why he started seeking comfort elsewhere. As a result, the family was caught up in a major scandal. When Yaroslav was caught in a passionate embrace with his subordinate, there was no divorce. Such scandals are foreign to the bureaucrat Nabiullina. Elvira forgave the betrayal. All family problems were resolved quietly, at home, in the kitchen.
Nabiullina is not a weak but a quiet player. Her very best role is that of a grey eminence, and people who are like that always make those individuals clinging to their ministerial or general's chair quite uneasy.
Perhaps Elvira remembered that, back in the day, her betrothed Yaroslav had also cheated on his first wife with her, and he has 2 children from that marriage. Or perhaps this was her response to the provocation from her numerous enemies.
She, like a truly good girl, inherently knows how to save face, never throws unnecessary tantrums, and is even genuinely willing to set aside her own personal feelings just to completely avoid escalating any conflict whatsoever.
Whatever the case may be, Elvira once again proved to everyone she knows how to take a hit. And although it became clear to everyone that the central bank chief's family affairs are no better than those of her country, unlike her husband, Putin still values her. Nabiullina's ability to take full responsibility for the country's complete economic collapse allows the bunker Tsar to distance himself from all the negative consequences and reactions directed at him.
With such a key interest rate, of course, this is simply madness. Any contract that we sign is already inherently unprofitable for us.
In the minds of Russians, the picture emerges. Putin responsible for the positive, the central bank and Nabiullina for the negative.
I know it's certainly not easy, but let's really try our absolute best not to get into any political arguments at work, at home, or on social media platforms. They only tend to drain the vital energy we truly need to effectively do our jobs.
The question arises, why does she do all this? After all, it seems she hasn't gained either fame or money.
The conditions for the Russian economy have changed dramatically. New foreign sanctions have led to a significant change in the ruble's exchange rate.
Why didn't Elvira Nabiullina leave the central bank herself right after the start of the full-scale war?
Let's not get involved.
In the spring of 2022, Bloomberg published an article claiming that the head of the central bank, Elvira Nabiullina, wanted to resign after the start of the full-scale invasion, but Putin did not let her go. Her departure could have caused panic and made the situation worse.
Record collapse of the ruble exchange rate since the default of 1998. Three-digit numbers appeared on the currency exchange boards. On the 28th of February, the dollar on the Moscow exchange reached 109 rubles and the euro 122. Both those who wanted to sell currency at the new rate and those who wanted to buy at least at that rate, fearing a further fall of the national currency, flocked to currency exchange points in Moscow.
The straight-A student was unable to leave the throne of the central bank.
Of course, you are free to leave. But I must warn you, our reach is indeed very long.
Elvira Nabiullina has two hostages behind her. They are her husband, Yaroslav Kuzminov, and her son, who also works at the Higher School of Economics. And I think that if she tries to jump ship or get off the train, both of them will find themselves in very serious trouble.
An extraordinary life journey from an iron lady who proudly entered the top 100 most influential women in the world to an official who is now under personal sanctions from many countries, including the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The grounds for this were her efforts to shield the Kremlin from sanctions and her involvement in financially supporting the aggression against Ukraine.
We talk about risks, but we are preparing for these risks.
The Security Service of Ukraine has charged Nabiullina with aiding the financing of the war. According to the investigation, she changed the strategy of the Russian central bank to support the occupation, evade sanctions, and facilitate the financing of Russian occupying military groups. She's also accused of introducing the ruble zone in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine.
And now it makes sense to conduct a review. Which changes in financial legislation that have taken place should, as they say, be consigned to oblivion?
Despite Elvira Nabiullina's undeniable talents, Nabiullina is now walking on very thin ice. There is a huge hole in the budget, sanctions are not being lifted, and there are enormous expenses for the war. At the same time, Putin is demanding even more money for the army. And this isn't even rock bottom yet. The decline is bound to continue. Which means that sooner or later, Putin will make Elvira the scapegoat and pin all the blame on her. The FSB, the Investigative Committee, and other security agencies are eagerly waiting for the boss to give the command to attack.
The entire population has gone grey, but otherwise the wonderful Elvira says everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.